The sun had not yet risen on the horizon when William Thompson was already traversing the vast pastures of his ranch. The morning dew soaked his leather boots as he observed, with experienced eyes, the herd that had made him one of the biggest names in cattle ranching in Dallas. But his greatest pride, his true gem, was separated from the other animals in a special pasture. Thunder, an impressive black bull who, unlike his peers, carried an almost mystical serenity. "Good morning, champion," William murmured, approaching the fence. The bull raised his head majestically, his deep eyes meeting those of his owner with a familiarity that always intrigued visitors. Thunder was no ordinary bull. His unique combination of strength and gentleness had made him a living legend in the rodeo circuit. At the ranch headquarters, preparations for the big Dallas rodeo were in full swing. Posters scattered throughout. The city advertised Thunder as the main attraction, the invincible bull. William watched the commotion among the ranch hands with a mix of pride and apprehension. This wasn't just another rodeo, it was his chance to firmly establish his name on the national stage. "Boss, the buyers from Austin have arrived," announced Joseph, his trusted foreman, interrupting his thoughts. William adjusted his hat and headed to the office where 3 men in suits, out of place in the rural setting, awaited him. Among them was Richard Johnson, a well-known businessman in the industry whose smile didn't reach his eyes. "William, my friend," exclaimed Richard, extending his hand. "We came to see this legend you've been keeping here up close. The rumors about Thunder have reached Austin." The meeting unfolded with numbers, offers, and counter-offers. The figures presented were tempting, but William wasn't interested in selling Thunder. The bull was more than an investment, it was his legacy. "Gentlemen, I appreciate the interest, but Thunder is not for sale," he declared firmly. "He is the future of this ranch." Richard kept his smile, but his eyes hardened. "Every animal has its price, William. Think carefully. With that money, you could buy an entire ranch." After the visitors left, William returned to Thunder's pasture. The sun was already setting, painting the sky in orange hues that reflected off the animal's black coat. Something about Richard's persistence bothered him, as if there was more to that interest than just business. In the city, preparations for the rodeo were intensifying, the streets filled with stalls, country music echoed from every corner, and Thunder's name was on everyone's lips. William personally oversaw every detail of his bull's participation in the event. On the eve of the big day, while inspecting the arena facilities, William found an envelope in his office. Inside, an old, yellowed photograph showed a black calf, next to a woman with a gentle expression. On the back, a single handwritten word, "Remember." Intrigued, he tucked the photo into a drawer. The rodeo would begin in less than 24 hours, and he needed to stay focused. But that image had awakened something in his memory, a half-forgotten story about the origin of Thunder that he had never fully investigated. That night, in his room at the ranch headquarters, William couldn't sleep. Through the window, he could see Thunder's silhouette under the moonlight, majestic and solitary. The bull seemed restless, something unusual in his typically calm demeanor. The morning of the rodeo arrived with an electric energy in the air. The arena was packed, flags fluttered in the wind, and the crowd buzzed with anticipation. William, from his privileged spot, observed everything with heightened attention. It was then that he noticed among the crowd a young woman who seemed out of place. Her restless eyes scanned the arena as if searching for something or someone. Before he could reflect on that strange presence, the loudspeakers announced, "The main attraction, ladies and gentlemen, prepare to meet the King of Dallas, the invincible Thunder." The chute doors opened, and the imposing black bull emerged into the arena. The crowd erupted in applause, but something felt different. Thunder, always so controlled, seemed agitated. His eyes scanned the crowd until they fixed on a specific point, exactly where the mysterious young woman stood. What happened next would forever be etched in the memories of everyone present. Thunder, the most controlled bull in America, was about to change the course of many lives on that sunny afternoon in Dallas. If this story intrigued you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Tell us which city you're watching from, and let's continue. Chaos erupted in the arena within seconds. Thunder, in completely atypical behavior, charged at the fence with tremendous force. The once vibrant crowd now rose in panic. The metal structure gave way as if it were made of paper, and the Black Bull surged toward the stands. The mysterious young woman, who just moments ago had been watching everything intently, now ran toward the exit, her backpack swinging on her back. Thunder, ignoring everyone else, followed her direction precisely, as if an invisible thread connected them. "Stop him," William shouted, but his voice was lost in the chaos. The ranch hands, experienced in handling emergencies, hesitated at the unprecedented behavior of the animal. Thunder showed no aggression. He seemed more determined to reach something or someone. The chase left the arena and continued through the outskirts of Dallas. William, riding his fastest horse, followed the trail left by the unusual pair. His heart raced, not just from the pursuit, but from the feeling that he was about to discover something that would change everything he thought he knew about his prized bull. After a few miles, the urban landscape gave way to open fields. Was there near an old abandoned ranch that William finally found them. The scene left him speechless. Thunder was completely calm, his head lowered close to the young woman, who was gently stroking his muzzle with familiarity, silent tears streaming down her face. "Who are you?" William asked, dismounting cautiously. The young woman startled, as if only now noticing his presence. "My name is Isabella," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "And this is Lightning." "Lightning?" William furrowed his brow. "This bull is named Thunder. He's been my property for 5 years." Isabella shook her head, a sad smile on her lips. "No, he was born here, on this ranch. I saw him being born. My mother named him Lightning because he was born during the biggest storm Dallas has ever seen." William's mind began to race. The mysterious photo from the previous day, the auction documents where he had bought Thunder, the suspicious interest of Richard Johnson, all the pieces were starting to form a puzzle, larger than he had imagined. "Your mother?" William hesitated, recalling the woman in the photograph. "Who was she?" "Helen Roberts," Isabella replied, her chin lifting with pride. "The best cattle breeder this region has ever known, until she fell ill and—" Her voice faltered. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and red. Thunder, or Lightning, remained calm, as if he had finally found peace after reuniting with a lost part of his past. "Why show up now?" William questioned, still trying to process all the information. Isabella opened her backpack and pulled out an old notebook, its pages yellowed with age. "I found my mother's diary last week, hidden in the attic of the house where I live in Chicago. It tells a very different story from the one I was told about the end of the ranch and the sale of the animals." At that moment, the sound of approaching engines interrupted the conversation. Headlights cut through the twilight, and 3 pickup trucks appeared on the dirt road. From the first one, Richard Johnson stepped out, his face a mask of feigned concern. "William, my friend, what a scare you gave us. We came to help recover your bull," he said, but his eyes fixed on Isabella with an expression that mixed surprise and something else, something close to fear. "You!" Isabella exclaimed, her voice filled with recognition and accusation. "You were the ranch manager when my mother fell ill." The air seemed to grow heavier with the tension of the moment. Thunder, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, positioned himself protectively between Isabella and the newcomers. William, observing the scene, realized he was in the middle of a much larger story than a simple bull escape. The sun had finally set completely, plunging the field into elongated shadows. The revelations of that afternoon were only the beginning of a plot that would involve secrets kept for years, loyalties tested, and a quest for justice that would forever change the fate of everyone involved. The tension in the air was palpable as Richard Johnson took a few steps forward, his businesslike smile contrasting with the hostility in his eyes. "Isabella Roberts, you've grown so much since the last time we saw each other. Your mother would be proud." "Don't you dare talk about my mother," Isabella replied, her voice trembling with restrained anger. "Not after what you did." William Thompson watched the exchange with growing interest. Thunder, or Lightning, stood motionless between Isabella and the newcomers, like a black wall of muscle and protective instinct. "I think we all need to talk," William interjected, his firm voice cutting through the tension. "And from what I'm seeing, there's a lot to explain." Richard adjusted his tie, visibly uncomfortable. "There's nothing to explain, William. This young woman is clearly confused. The bull is yours, legally purchased at auction. I have all the documents that prove it. Like the documents you forged when you sold my mother's ranch." Isabella pulled out an old, yellowed sheet from her notebook. "I found the real power of attorney in her diary. The signature you used to sell the ranch and the animals was fake." The businessman visibly paled. His men shifted uneasily, but a gesture from him kept them in place. "Let's go into the old house," suggested William, pointing to the nearby abandoned building. "This story needs to be told from the beginning." The old headquarters of the Roberts Ranch, though abandoned, still bore traces of its former grandeur. Isabella walked through the dusty room with familiarity, her fingers lightly brushing the covered furniture. Through the dirty windows, they could see Thunder grazing peacefully under the watchful eyes of William's ranch hands. "My mother built all of this from scratch," Isabella began, her voice heavy with emotion. She was respected throughout the state for her work in cattle genetics. Lightning, or Thunder as you know him, William, was her greatest pride, the result of years of genetic selection. William nodded, beginning to understand. "That's why he's so special. His docility, his strength." "Exactly," Isabella continued. "But then she fell ill. Cancer. Richard offered to manage the ranch while she underwent treatment in Chicago. I was only 15 years old at the time." Richard shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I just did what was necessary to keep the business running." "Necessary?" Isabella laughed humorlessly. "You took advantage of my mother when she was too weak to notice your manipulations. You sold off the animals little by little, embezzled money, and when she died, the ranch was bankrupt," Richard interrupted heatedly. "I saved what I could." "Liar!" Isabella slammed the journal onto the dusty table. "My mother recorded everything here, every shady deal, every forged document. She knew what you were doing, but she was too weak to fight." William picked up the journal, flipping through its pages carefully. Meticulous notes, numbers, dates. Helen Roberts had documented her own downfall, powerless to stop it. "And Thunder?" William asked. "How did he end up at the auction?" Isabella wiped away a tear. "He was too special to be sold quietly like the other animals. So Richard waited for my mother to pass, forged ownership documents, and put him up for auction. I was sent to live with my aunt in Chicago, unaware of any of this until I found the journal last week." Richard stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. These are baseless accusations from a resentful girl. William, you won't believe it." "The auction documents," William interrupted him. "I always thought it was strange how some pages seemed newer than others, and the inconsistencies in the dates. Now it all makes sense." A heavy silence fell over the room. Outside, the distant neighing of a horse and the low moo of thunder were the only sounds breaking the stillness of the approaching night. "You have no proof," Richard said finally, his voice cold. "And even if you did, years have passed. There's nothing you can do?" A smile appeared on Isabella's lips. "About that, there's something else you need to know. Something my mother hid before she died. Something she mentions in the last pages of the diary." Richard's face lost all color. On the porch of the abandoned house, Thunder raised his head, as if sensing that more revelations were coming. Revelations that would forever change the fate of everyone present. The silence that followed Isabella's words was broken only by the creaking of the old floorboards under Richard's restless feet. The moonlight streamed through the dusty windows, casting dancing shadows on the peeling walls of the old room. "In the last weeks of her life," Isabella continued, flipping through the diary to its final pages, "my mother did something no one expected. She knew she was being robbed, knew you were planning to take everything, Richard, so she set her own trap." William watched intently as Isabella walked over to an old painting on the wall, a portrait of a ranch in its glory days. Carefully she removed it, revealing a small built-in safe. "Impossible," Richard murmured, his usual composure beginning to crack. "We searched everywhere." "The combination," Isabella smiled, Was my birth date backward? Something only I would. No? Her fingers spun the dial with precision, and the safe opened with a metallic click. From inside, she pulled out a red folder, its pages protected from time by the steel of the safe. My mother was much smarter than you thought, Richard. She kept a second ledger. Every fraudulent transaction, every forged document, every penny. Embezzled, all recorded with surgical precision. Richard lunged forward abruptly, but William stepped between him and Isabella. Not another step, he warned, his voice heavy with authority. You don't understand, Richard said, running his hands through his hair in despair. I built an empire. You can't destroy everything because of some old papers. An empire built on lies, William replied. Using the money of a sick woman, stealing. Her daughter's future. Isabella continued retrieving documents from the safe. There's more. My mother didn't trust just paper records. She had an ally, someone who documented everything. She glanced meaningfully outside where thunder grazed under the moonlight. The collar, Richard whispered, growing even paler. What collar? William asked, intrigued. Isabella smiled. Thunder has always worn an identification collar since he was little, but it wasn't an ordinary collar. Inside it, there's a microchip. GPS, Richard. My mother tracked every place you took the illegally sold animals, every ranch, every buyer, every under-the-table deal. The sound of something shattering cut through the air. Richard had knocked over an old vase, his hands visibly trembling. Tayo can't prove anything. These are old stories. No one will believe them. The district attorney will. A new voice rang out from the door. Everyone turned to see Joseph, William's foreman, accompanied by two men in formal suits. Detective Martinez, one of them introduced himself, flashing his badge. We received a very interesting tip this week about fraud in the agricultural sector. Richard looked around like a cornered animal. His men outside, noticing the police arrival, were already getting into their trucks, abandoning their boss to his fate. It wasn't just about the money, was it? Isabella asked, her voice softer now. You wanted to prove you could be greater than my mother, that you could take everything she built and do it better. The businessman slumped heavily into a chair, all his previous arrogance gone. She had it all, he murmured. Respect, admiration, their legacy. I worked just as hard as she did, but no one ever saw me the same way. As Richard was led away by the police, William and Isabella remained in the old room, Helen's journal between them, like a bridge between the past and the present. What happens now? William asked, looking out the window at Thunder, who seemed more at peace than ever. Now, Isabella replied, a determined gleam in her eyes, we rebuild, not just the ranch, but my mother's legacy. And, she hesitated, looking at William, I would like you to be a part of this. Outside, the first light of dawn began to tint the sky, promising a new day, and with it the chance to fix the mistakes of the past and build a fairer future. The days following Richard's arrest were intense. The news spread quickly through Dallas and the surrounding area, sparking a wave of investigations that revealed a scheme much larger than anyone had imagined. Other breeders began to come forward, reporting suspicious deals and fraudulent documents. At the old Roberts Ranch, now partially restored thanks to the joint efforts of William and Isabella, life was beginning to return to its natural course. Thunder, who now answered to both his original name and the new one, seemed happier than ever, as if he felt his mission of bringing those people together had been accomplished. On a particularly hot afternoon, while overseeing the renovation of the main corral, Isabella found an old box in the barn. Inside it, photographs and newspaper clippings told the story of Helen Roberts' success. Look at this, she called William, showing a yellowed photo. This is the day Lightning was born. Mom always said he had something special. William examined the photograph with interest. Helen was holding a newborn calf, her face radiant with pride. Your mother was an extraordinary woman, he commented. Her work in genetic improvement was decades ahead of its time. Do you know what's most amazing? Isabella smiled, pulling more documents from the box. I found her notes on the breeding program. What she did with Lightning, it was revolutionary. She managed to combine strength and docility in a way no one thought possible. As they spoke, Joseph, the loyal foreman, hurried over. "Boss, there's a lady at the main house wanting to speak with Miss Isabella. She says she worked here a long time ago." On the porch of the main house, a grey-haired lady waited. Upon seeing Isabella, her eyes filled with tears. "Miss Isabella, how you've grown. I'm Mary. I took care of you when you were little." Recognition lit up Isabella's face. "Mary, you were here when Mum got sick." The former employee nodded gravely. "Yes, and there's something you need to know. Something I've kept all these years out of fear of Mr. Richard." In the following hours, Mary revealed surprising details about Helen's final days. How she had uncovered Richard's scheme through documents found accidentally. How she had meticulously planned her counteroffensive, even knowing she might not live to execute it. "Your mother knew she didn't have much time," Mary explained, her voice choked. "So she started preparing everything. The documents in the safe, the microchip in Lightning's collar, even letters explaining everything which she asked me to hide." "Letters?" Isabella asked, surprised. "Where are they?" Mary smiled mysteriously. "In the safest place possible, in the lining of her favorite saddle, the one stored in the old tack room." William and Isabella exchanged meaningful glances before rushing to the indicated location. The saddle was there, covered in dust but intact. Carefully, they removed the worn lining, revealing a set of carefully preserved envelopes. The letters contained not only additional evidence against Richard, but also detailed instructions on how to recover the ranch, including contacts of former business partners loyal to Helen. Most importantly, there was a letter addressed specifically to Isabella. "My dear daughter," Isabella read aloud, tears streaming down her face. "If you are reading this, it means you have finally discovered the truth. Do not blame yourself for not realizing it sooner. You were just a child. Lightning was my last and greatest creation. But you, my daughter, were my masterpiece. I entrust to you not only our heritage, but above all, our legacy of honesty and love for the land." William watched in respectful silence, realizing he was witnessing not just the unveiling of past secrets, but the rebirth of a legacy important to the entire region. In the pasture, Thunder Lightning raised his head, as if sensing the energy of the moment. The sun began to set, painting the sky with colors reminiscent of that distant storm in which he had been born, marking the beginning of a story that now, finally, found its true course. A year had passed since the revelations that changed the fate of the old Roberts Ranch. The property, now fully restored, had once again become a reference in the region, but under a new perspective. The union between the tradition established by Helen and the modernization brought by William. It was a Saturday morning when the first visitors began to arrive. The ranch opened its doors to inaugurate the Helen Roberts Research Center, a joint project between Isabella and William that aimed to continue the pioneering work in genetic improvement started by Helen, but now with a focus on animal welfare as well. "Your mother would be proud," William remarked, watching Isabella greet the guests. She had become a natural leader, combining the technical knowledge she gained from her studies with the passion for cattle farming she inherited from Helen. The center of attention, as always, was Thunder, the imposing black bull, now officially registered with his two names. Thunder Lightning grazed peacefully in a special enclosure near the research center. His collar, still containing the historic microchip, had been upgraded to include sensors that assisted in animal behavior studies. "Ladies and gentlemen," Isabella began her inauguration speech, her steady voice echoing through the space. "A year ago, this ranch was just a memory of what it once was. Today, it represents much more than a simple return to its roots. It represents the union of past and future, tradition and innovation." Among the attendees were several breeders who had been victims of Richard's schemes and were now becoming partners in the new project. The arrest of the businessman had triggered a series of investigations that were still reverberating in the industry, promoting a much-needed cleanup in the market. "The work my mother started here wasn't just about raising the best cattle," Isabella continued. "It was about doing it ethically, with respect for the animals and the land. Today, with the invaluable help of William Thompson, we've not only rescued that legacy but expanded it." William, standing beside her, smiled discreetly. His partnership with Isabella had evolved naturally from a professional collaboration into something deeper, rooted in mutual respect and shared values. Together, they had developed a new management model that was beginning to set a standard in the industry. And none of this would have been possible, Isabella went on, without a very special animal. She gestured toward Thunder, who lifted his head majestically as if understanding they were talking about him. He's not just a rodeo champion or an example of superior genetics. He's the living link between my mother's work and our future. After the official ceremony, as guests toured the facilities, Isabella and William walked to the old barn, now transformed into a modern research center. On the walls, photos of Helen mingled with charts and computer screens, symbolizing the bridge between eras. "Do you know," Isabella commented, stopping in front of a particular photo of her mother with Thunder as a calf, "sometimes I wonder if she knew all this would happen like this." William took her hand gently. "Your mother planted the right seeds, Isabella. She knew that one day you would return to make everything she started flourish." In the pasture, Thunder watched a group of calves, the result of the breeding program that continued his genetic legacy. The storm that had marked his birth had given way to clear spring days, but his strength and serenity remained as a constant reminder that some stories don't end. They transform and carry on through generations. At dusk, as the last visitors left, Isabella and William remained on the porch of the main house, gazing at the horizon. The Roberts Thompson Ranch, as it was now known, was not just a symbol of redemption or restored justice. It was living proof that the strongest bonds, whether between people, animals, or the land itself, endure through time and adversity. And Thunder, the bull who had united destinies and revealed truths, continued his silent vigil under the Dallas sky, guardian of a legacy that now belonged not just to one family, but to all those who believed in the power of truth and the strength of love for the land. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Tell us which city you're watching from, and stay tuned.